Madam Chair, distinguished members of the Commission, colleagues, I speak to you today on behalf of Amnesty International to raise urgent concerns over the persecution, displacement, and criminalization of the Garifuna people in Honduras, an Afro-Indigenous community whose fundamental rights continue to be violated with impunity. The Garifuna have lived along Honduras' North and Caribbean coast for over 2 centuries, maintaining a deep spiritual and cultural relationship with their ancestral lands. These lands, rich in biodiversity and strategically located, have become the target of private and state-backed development projects, tourist resorts, palm oil plantations, and extractive industries, all promoted without free, prior, and informed consent as required by the international law. Let me be clear, this is not an isolated land dispute. This is a systematic pattern of dispossession and violence carried out against historically marginalized people whose rights have been recognized but not respected. The Inter-American Court of Human Rights ruled in 2015 that Honduras government must restore Garifuna lands and provide reparations to communities like Triunfo de la Cruz and Punta Piedra. Nearly a decade later, those rulings remain largely unenforced. In fact, what we are witnessing is the opposite: increased militarization of Garifuna communities, heightened surveillance of community leaders, and frequent arbitrary arrests. The most chilling example came on July 18, 2020, when 4 Garifuna men, including Snyder Centeno, the young president of Triunfo de la Cruz Community Council, were forcibly disappeared by armed men in police uniforms. Witnesses saw them taken from their homes at gunpoint. Nearly 4 years later, the Honduran government has failed to produce meaningful progress in the investigation. No one has been brought to justice. Their families still wait every day for answers. This is not just national failure. It is a breach of Honduras' obligation under international law. The state is party to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which guarantees the right to life, liberty, and security of person. It has ratified ILO Convention 169, which mandates protection of the indigenous land rights, and yet often violated, ignored in favor of short-term economic gain, foreign investment, and allied interest. It is critical to recognize that the criminalization of Garifuna leaders is a tool of intimidation. Peaceful protesters are accused of usurpation. Community leaders are surveilled, and collective land titles are undermined by fraudulent sales and judicial manipulation. These are not legal errors. They are political tactics designed to silence resistance and strip communities of their autonomy. Madam Chair, the consequences of inaction are grave. The erosion of Garifuna rights is part of a larger global crisis facing indigenous and Afro-descendant land defenders. If we allow these violations to persist in Honduras, we send a dangerous message to the government and corporations that treaties can be ignored and people can disappear without consequences. Therefore, Amnesty International calls on the Commission to take urgent action. We urge you to demand an independent international investigation into the disappearance in Triunfo de la Cruz with full cooperation from the Honduran authorities. Hold Honduras accountable for its failure to implement binding ruling from the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Establish UN special mechanisms or rapporteur visits to assess the situation of Afro-Indigenous communities in Central America with a focus on the Garifuna rights. Provide direct support for community-led initiatives, including legal training, protection measures for leaders at risk, and funding for autonomous land mapping. Madam Chair, human rights law must not remain symbolic. These norms exist to protect the vulnerable, to ensure that a small coastal community is not erased in the name of profit. The Garifuna are not simply resisting development, they are defending a worldview rooted in environmental care, cultural survival, and communal dignity. These are defending principles that this very commission was created to uphold. Let us honor those principles, not with words, but with actions. Thank you.